sang softly through the open tower window, lifting the corners of scattered papers and sending a trail of golden leaves skimming across the marble floor. High above the kingdom of Evermeadow, where clouds brushed the castle spires like feathers, a girl sat alone at a round wooden table. Her fingers, smudged with charcoal and paint, moved carefully over a parchment, shaping something delicate and bright beneath the tip of her pencil. All around her, sketches fluttered on the walls, castles in the clouds, dragons made of mist, suns with faces that smiled. Far below, the royal gardens bloomed in neat, perfect lines, and the sound of distant trumpets floated up to the tower. Servants bustled, guards marched, maids whispered behind silken curtains. But inside the tower, the only sound was the steady scratch of drawing. Outside the tower door, two maids waited in silence, holding a silver tray on which sat a heavy golden crown. Its jewels sparkled in the torchlight, and its weight made the tray tremble slightly in their hands. This crown was meant for the girl in the tower, the princess, whose 12th birthday would mark her official naming as heir to the throne. But the girl had not opened the door. Inside, the princess pressed harder with her pencil, the lines of her drawing darkening into shape. She had seen the crown 100 times in portraits, worn by kings and queens in stiff robes with eyes that never seemed to smile. But in her mind, a different crown shimmered. A crown that was not cold and heavy, but alive with light and laughter. A crown that felt like it belonged to her. She paused, held her breath, and began to draw again slowly, carefully, her own crown, the one no one had ever seen. Every morning, just as the sun spilled gold over the rooftops of Evermeadow, Princess Alara climbed the narrow spiral stairs to her tower room. She came alone, always alone, for no one else was allowed beyond the door unless summoned. Her governess said it was to protect her peace and learning. The guards said it was tradition. But Alara knew it was something else, something none of them would say out loud. Because Alara didn't smile like the paintings. She didn't speak when spoken to, didn't nod or curtsy when expected. She watched instead. She listened. She drew. And in the minds of the court, that made her strange. Strange, perhaps, but not unkind. Birds flew to her windowsill and stayed. Bees followed her through gardens as if she were a blossom. Even the royal cat, who trusted no one, curled beside her feet when she sat quietly in the halls. Alara felt things that others didn't see, like the sadness in her father's eyes when the throne room was empty, or the way her mother's smile faltered each time she reached for the crown. She did not want that sadness, and she did not want that crown. It was a thing made for someone else, someone who walked proudly and spoke loudly, who sat still at banquets and nodded through ceremonies. Someone who could wear gold without feeling the weight of it pressing into their bones. Instead, Alara made her own crown from paper and light. It began with small sketches, leaf shapes, and twisted vines, tiny moons and stars tucked between feathered wings. She folded paper until it stood like branches, painted it until it glowed like morning frost. Every day she added more, hidden away in the tower, while the crown on the silver tray waited outside her door. And then, one afternoon, something strange happened. Alara was drawing near the window, the tip of her pencil dancing over a new design, when the clouds outside darkened too quickly for sunset. A sudden hush fell over the room, and a single white feather drifted in through the window, landing gently on her paper. She blinked. There were no birds in the sky. Then came the sound, not loud, but deep and rumbling, like stones rolling beneath the earth. It echoed through the tower walls, through the floor beneath her feet. The feather lifted on a breath of wind and vanished. Alara stood slowly, her heart beating faster. Down in the valley beyond the castle gates, a shimmer of silver light twisted into the sky. The trees bowed, the fields rippled like water. And from that strange light came a shape tall and glowing, walking without footsteps across the land. It was the spirit of the crown. Long ago, the people of Evermeadow spoke of it in whispers, a guardian, older than kings, neither kind nor cruel, but watchful. It came only when the heir of the kingdom had not chosen their path. Some said it tested their heart, others said it offered a choice, but no one alive had ever seen it. Ilara didn't tell anyone what she saw that day. She didn't speak of the feather or the silver light. But something changed in her heart. She began to wake earlier. She worked longer in her tower. Her drawings grew richer, deeper, until they seemed to pulse with life. Her paper crown no longer looked like a toy, but something ancient and wild, like it belonged to the wind itself. Still, the court waited. The 12th birthday approached. The king's voice grew tighter, the queen's footsteps sharper. The crown on the silver tray gleamed each morning in the hall. Ilara's maid, gentle Muriel, tried once to speak as she brushed her hair. She said there would be a great celebration, that every noble house would come, that Ilara would walk beneath rose petals and banners, that she would wear the royal crown, finally, and the people would cheer her name. Ilara only nodded, because she could not say what she truly felt, that the cheering would not be for her, but for a shadow of someone she could not become. The night before her birthday, Ilara lit a candle beside her window and sat watching the stars. Her paper crown stood nearby, glinting softly in the candlelight. It had become a masterpiece of color and shape, woven leaves, folded silver swans, delicate antlers made of twigs dipped in pearl dust. As she looked out, the silver light returned. This time, it moved closer over the hills, across the river, and into the edge of the forest that lined the royal garden. It did not hide, it waited. Ilara knew what she had to do. She rose before dawn and dressed in her simplest tunic, wrapping the paper crown carefully in a cloth. She crept past sleeping guards, past silent corridors and moonlit pillars. The halls that once felt heavy now felt light beneath her steps, as though they too were holding their breath. Out in the garden, the air shimmered like water, and the silver glow pulsed behind the trees. Ilara stepped between the hedges, into the woods. The forest did not feel dark. Instead, it felt alive with watching eyes, soft rustles, whispered wind, the distant call of an owl. As she walked, the light drew her forward until she came to a clearing unlike any other. There stood the spirit. Its form shifted like smoke and moonlight. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed like stars underwater. Ilara felt no fear, only stillness, like standing before a mirror that saw her heart. The spirit reached out a hand made of cloud and shimmer. Between its fingers hung the image of the royal crown, heavy and golden. It glowed with power, but coldly. Then the image changed. Her own crown appeared fragile, beautiful, trembling slightly in the wind. A whisper brushed her thoughts, not a voice, but a question. Choose. Ilara's fingers tightened around the cloth in her hands. She stepped forward, unwrapped the paper crown, and held it high. The forest seemed to sigh. The spirit bowed, not deeply, but enough. The royal crown shimmered once more, then crumbled into a scatter of golden leaves, vanishing into the ground. Light exploded through the clearing, soft and warm like sunrise. Ilara stood at its center, her paper crown glowing as though lit from within. In that moment, she felt something shift not just in the forest, but in the air of the entire kingdom. She turned and walked back through the trees. At the castle gates, the guards stared wide-eyed, but did not stop her. Inside, servants dropped their trays. Courtiers gasped. The king stood in the throne room, the queen beside him, both frozen in silence as their daughter walked forward, not in royal robes, not wearing gold, but with her crown of paper and starlight. And when she reached the throne, she did not kneel. She placed her crown on the empty pedestal beside the golden one, and for the first time, smiled. Not because she had become something else, but because she had chosen to be exactly who she was. The silence in the throne room thickened, heavy as storm clouds before rain. No one moved, no one spoke. The candlelight flickered against the high walls, casting long shadows behind velvet curtains and carved pillars. All eyes were fixed on Princess Ilara as she stood beside the pedestal, her paper crown glowing softly in the golden light. On the other pedestal, the royal crown gleamed with a sharp, polished glare, as though it too had been watching and waiting. Ilara's heart beat loud in her ears, but her hands were steady. Her paper crown, though delicate, did not waver. She looked at her father, King Ronan, whose face was carved in lines of duty and time. His hands gripped the arms of the throne, and his eyes searched hers, looking, perhaps, for the daughter he thought he knew. Beside him, Queen Marilyn stood tall and silent, her fingers twined so tightly in her cloak that her knuckles turned white. Her gaze flicked between the two crowns, between tradition and something entirely new. The courtiers pressed closer, whispering behind fans and sleeves. The royal advisors, wrapped in velvet and ceremony, murmured in confusion. The royal crown had never been refused, not in all the history of Evermeadow. But Alara had not refused it out of rebellion. She had not thrown it down or mocked it. She had simply chosen something else, something made with her own hands, with her own heart. And that was what frightened them most. A low voice echoed across the chamber. The herald, old and serious, stepped forward with the ceremonial scroll in hand. He looked down at it, then up at Alara, and for a moment, his voice faltered. This was the moment he had rehearsed all week, the speech, the trumpet call, the lifting of the royal crown. But the girl standing before him wore no robe of state, no necklace of rubies, only a paper crown and a quiet gaze that did not waver. He hesitated. Alara's heart beat faster. A flicker of doubt stirred. Had she done something wrong? Was she foolish to believe the spirit's bow had been a blessing? Would they take her crown away, tell her she had failed? Then she felt it. A breeze, soft as breath, brushed through the hall, though the windows were closed. It passed over her paper crown, which shimmered brighter, like moonlight striking snow. The breeze lifted it slightly, just a hair, and the room seemed to exhale. Somewhere near the back, a court scribe dropped his pen. The queen stepped forward, slowly. She moved with the grace of someone who had worn a crown all her life, and yet her steps now seemed unsure. When she reached Alara, she did not speak. She simply reached out and gently touched the edge of the paper crown. Her fingers paused there, her lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, something shimmered between them. Not magic, but memory. For the queen, once, had been a girl too. A girl who drew flowers on parchment and dreamed of flying ships. A girl who had worn silk before she was ready and silenced her dreams with duty. Now she looked into her daughter's eyes and saw not defiance, but truth. She turned, her voice soft but clear. Let her wear the crown she has made. Gasps. Shouts. A few nobles stepped back as if the floor had tilted beneath them. The herald clutched his scroll, unsure what words to read. The advisors began to protest ancient laws, tradition, precedent, but their voices drowned in the sudden hum rising from the room. And then, the king rose. His shadow stretched across the tiles like the sweep of a wing. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he walked down the steps of the throne. He stopped before Alara, towering in his royal coat, trimmed with lion's fur and golden thread. His face, always solemn, now held something deeper, a quiet sorrow perhaps, or wonder. He looked not at the crown she wore, but at her eyes, the same eyes that once looked up at him from a cradle, the same eyes that now held the strength of mountains. He lifted his hand. The crowd stilled, but he did not reach for the golden crown. He reached behind him, unfastened the clasp of his own royal cloak, and let it fall gently to the ground. It landed like a whisper. Then he bowed. Not low, like a subject. Just enough to show the world that he saw her not as a child or a puzzle or a disobedient heir, but as someone who had chosen her own path with courage. The hall fell silent again. But it was a different silence now, not heavy, but hushed in awe. The paper crown glowed brighter. And then, the golden crown, still resting on its pedestal, cracked down the center, not broken in anger, but as if releasing something long held inside. A soft light spilled from it. It did not shatter. It did not fall. It simply opened, like a pod releasing a seed. And from that light, a shape began to form. Floating above the two crowns was a new one, neither entirely gold nor paper, but a weaving of both. Vines of gold, petals of pearl, points of light and softness. It spun slowly in the air, then gently lowered itself onto the pedestal between them. The spirit had returned. Not in form, but in presence. A shimmering hush passed through the room, like wind in deep trees. And when it faded, the new crown remained. The queen stepped back. The king gestured, quietly. And Elara did not take it. She looked at the new crown, then at her paper one, still firm upon her head. She turned to the court, to the people who had watched with wide eyes and trembling hearts. She did not need a crown to prove she was worthy. Her voice, when it came, was soft and steady. She would not wear a crown that chose for her. She would not be shaped by gold or tradition. She would lead, if they wished her to, but not as a shadow of kings before, as herself, with the heart of a girl who drew pictures of the sky and walked through silver forests at dawn. Let them choose, she said. Let the people decide what kind of future they wanted. And then she stepped away from the pedestal. The crowd murmured, confused. The courtiers stirred. The advisors panicked. But far down in the courtyard, a sound rose. It began with a child, a girl holding a wooden toy crown, sitting on her father's shoulders. She clapped, then another, and another. The people began to cheer not for the crown, not for gold, for Elara, the girl who had dared to draw her own. And the wind that passed through the castle walls carried a single white feather, floating gently toward the open tower window, where a sketch waited unfinished. The final line would not be drawn by Elara's hand, but by the world she had changed. Days passed, then weeks, and the winds of change swept through the kingdom of Evermeadow, like spring after a long winter. The golden crown was no longer brought out on silver trays each morning. The paper crown, though fragile in body, had become something far stronger in spirit, its image now painted in village murals and etched into coins, not as a royal symbol, but as a sign of hope. Elara did not take the throne the next day. She did not sit in the high-backed chair or wear flowing robes stitched with rubies. Instead, she returned to her tower room, where the wind still curled gently through the open window, and her drawings still rustled like leaves. But the door was no longer closed. There were no guards outside. Anyone could visit now, and they did. Children came first, shy and curious, to see the princess who wore paper and spoke of stars. She sat on the floor with them, sharing paints and folded parchment, listening to their stories as they shaped their own tiny crowns. One boy made a crown of seashells. One girl made hers from pressed flowers. None of them looked alike, and that was the magic of it. Soon the tower became a place of wonder. Artists arrived with sketchbooks. Inventors brought tiny wind-up birds and wooden wings. Musicians played flutes shaped like tree branches. Each person who entered found a place not ruled by rules, but by imagination. Elara's parents watched from the windows above the court. The king, once a figure of firm tradition, began walking without his heavy cloak. The queen, whose fingers once trembled from holding too tightly to protocol, learned to laugh again softly at first, then brightly. Together, they visited the tower on a quiet morning, finding Elara sitting in a patch of sunlight, threading silver thread through paper. She looked up, not startled, but calm, as though she'd expected them. They sat with her on the floor. For the first time in many years, they spoke not as rulers, but as family. They asked questions not about lessons or duties, but about her dreams. Her voice, quiet as wind through reeds, shared them gardens that moved with the seasons, libraries shaped like birds in flight, a skywalk of mirrors where children could chase their reflections above the clouds. The king and queen listened, and they did not say no. Instead, they asked how they could help. The royal advisors, at first unsure how to advise a world they did not understand, began listening too. When the old laws were reviewed, Elara suggested one small change, that any heir, boy or girl, royal or not, should be given a choice, not just to lead, but to shape how they lead. To draw their own crown before wearing anyone else's. It became known as the choice of the crown. From that moment, each future ruler would face not only tradition, but their own heart. And though not all chose paper, or vines, or feathers, none were ever forced to choose gold again. On her 13th birthday, Elara stood not on a balcony, but in the central square, surrounded by lanterns and laughter. She wore a new crown woven of driftwood, moonglass, and ribbon. It shimmered, yes, but softly, like light across a calm lake. No trumpet sounded, no scroll was read. Instead, a girl in the crowd held up her own tiny crown made from daisy stems, and others followed. The sky filled with 100 shapes and colors as children lifted what they had made. The wind caught them, and they fluttered like butterflies into the air. Elara watched, her heart full, and for the first time since she was small, she felt completely seen. Not as the princess who would be queen, not as the girl in the tower, but as herself. Later that evening, long after the lanterns had dimmed and laughter faded to hush, Elara returned to her tower. The stars were bright above, painting the sky in silver threads. She lit a candle and sat at her table, picking up the drawing she had left unfinished so long ago. It was the picture of a girl crowned not by jewels or thrones, but by light and wind. Her arms stretched wide, and behind her rose not a castle, but wings of paper and sky. Elara looked at it, then slowly added the final line. A soft breeze passed through the window, lifting the edge of the page, as if approving. She smiled. She had not become a ruler like those before her. She had not become what others expected. She had become more. A whisper of movement drew her gaze to the window. There, perched on the sill, was a white bird, small, delicate, and watching. In its beak was a single feather, long and bright, like the one that had started everything. Elara held out her hand, and the bird dropped the feather into her palm. Then it flew, not away, but upward into the night sky, where its shape faded among the stars. She held the feather close. Outside in the kingdom below, lanterns still flickered in windows, and children dreamed not of crowns placed on their heads, but of the ones they might one day draw for themselves. And high in the tower, with her crown beside her and her story complete, Elara whispered a promise into the wind, that no child would ever be told their dreams were too strange, their voice too quiet, or their crown too different. For the greatest crowns are not given, they are made. And the truest rulers are those who choose them with love.